In Modern Warfare, one thing that's more important than ever is the create a class system, specifically the gunsmith system. Having more attachments than ever before and being able to use more attachments than ever before with a bunch of different attachments is so important within Modern Warfare. And not knowing what attachments or what class setup to use can really hinder how well you do in game. And every single year on every single Call of Duty game, I try to make actually a couple of these videos showing off my 5 best class setups, and I'll probably do this another like 5 months from now or so just to stay up to date on all of the weapon tuning and everything like that. But as of right now, I truly believe that the 5 classes that I'm going to give you in this video are the 5 best classes in the game, and we have a lot to talk about here. So let's just hop into it. Now, before we dive into the class setups, I just wanted to point out something that Activision is doing. I haven't talked about it yet. As of right now, they're actually doing something within the store. There's a bundle called the Outback Bundle, and 100% of the proceeds gained from selling this bundle are actually going to go over to Australia and help out the people, the animals, and the firefighters affected by the wildfires. Obviously, what's going on over there right now is extremely devastating, pretty much one of the craziest things I've seen in my lifetime. And if you guys didn't know, I actually went to school to be a firefighter before this whole YouTube thing took off. So kind of close to my heart for all the firefighters over there. So if you want to get some cool in-game items and support some Aussies while you do it, just hop over to the store and check out that Outback bundle. But without further ado, let's check out my top 5 classes. So for many of these classes, there is specific game modes or specific scenarios or maps that I use them on. However, this first class is kind of just your all-around good class. For the most part, I use this one in Ground War as I think it's the best Ground War class setup, but here's the class that we're looking at here. So I'm going to try to go through these classes as fast as possible. The first time I actually recorded this, it took me 5 minutes to go through this class, so I'm going to do it faster, I promise. So the first class we're going to be using is an Overkill class. I use this in Ground War, like I was saying before. The 2 weapons that I'm using are the M4A1 and the Kar98K. Reason being, I think the M4A1 is the best assault rifle, and the Kar98K is the best sniper rifle. Now, as far as the M4A1, the class that I'm using here is the Corvus barrel. This is going to improve your damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. It basically does everything you need it to do. The problem is it makes your aim down sights and movement speed worse. To counteract this, we're going to use the stippled grip. We use this on almost every single class we use. It improves the aim down sights speed and sprint out fire speed, and the con is aiming stability, which is idle sway. So worth it. Probably the best attachment in the game. So we use that. 50 round mags. You can use 60 round mags. I just prefer 50 because I'm using a secondary weapon. And then some sort of red dot or something like that. I just simply don't like the iron sights on this weapon, so the one I'm using is the Cronin. And then finally, the Singard Arms Invader stock. This is going to improve your strafe speed and is good for winning gunfights, so that's why I use it. This is my preferred class. There's lots of good classes with the M4 because it's a good weapon. This is just my preferred class. After this, the Kar98K. This one needs a little bit more of an explanation because you think this wouldn't be the best sniper in the game, when in fact it is. The problem with the sniper is the base weapon with no attachments kinda sucks. What you need to improve on this weapon is the damage and range. So the first thing to do that is a sniper scope. You can also use the variable zoom scope if you prefer it. I just prefer the sniper scope. After this, the 2 must-have attachments are the Singard Custom 27.6. This is going to improve your damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. Recoil control doesn't matter. It's just that damage range and bullet velocity. And then after that, use the monolithic suppressor. This is going to once again improve that damage range. Now, the downsides of both of these is it makes your aim down sight speed and aim walking speed slower. So to counteract that, once again, we're going to use the stippled grip tape and then the sleight of hand. If you don't need sleight of hand, I kind of think you don't need sleight of hand, but instead you can use the FTAC Sport, which is going to improve that aim down sight speed once again, but I'm using sleight of hand because I try to snipe a little bit more when I'm playing Ground War. As far as perks go, once again, using Overkill, so I'm able to use 2 weapons. The second perk is Ghost. I'm pretty much using this on all of my classes. It's just a must use in this game. Everyone's using it, and as soon as you don't, you're at a disadvantage as soon as anyone calls in a UAV. And then third perk is a little bit more difficult because all the third perks kind of suck in this game. I'm using Battle Hardened because I don't like getting stunned. Honestly, Tracker is probably a better perk. I just prefer Battle Hardened because I hate getting stunned. And if you're using a Dead Silence a lot, Tune Up is pretty decent as well. But if you don't want Battle Hardened, I would switch over to Tracker. It makes it easier for you to see your enemies. Now, to round off the class, almost every single class I use Semtex and Stim. Reason why I use Semtex is it's a little bit more reliable than a frag, but if you're on a map where a lot of people are camping, you might need to use a frag to bounce it around corners, but like I said, I prefer Semtex. And then Stim is simply because I play a little bit more aggressively. I get shot a lot, which means I need to heal a little bit faster in some situations. Hence, I use Stim on almost every single one of my classes. So then after that, I'm just going to go over this one last thing real quick. Field upgrades. For pretty much any respawn game mode, I use Munitions Box and Dead Silence with your Field Upgrade Pro. Reason being, I like to be able to flank around enemies, and if I run out of ammo, I'm not using Scavenger, so being able to throw down a munitions box is sometimes a little bit easier than having to pick up an enemy weapon. Then, for kill streaks, these are the ones that I've been using lately. Cluster Strike, because it's faster to call in than Cruise Missile. You don't have to stop, pull out a tablet, put yourself at risk. So I've been using Cluster Strike instead, and then I'm using a VTOL Jet or Harrier, and then a Chopper Gunner. I find that for the least amount of kills, this is what's going to get you the most amount of kills, so that's pretty much what I've been using. So that is class number 1. We'll go through the rest of them a little bit quicker, because now we've gone through why I like certain perks and why I like certain kill streaks. So like I said, this is kind of my go-to class for ground war. The reason being, I like to be able to have that sniper and that assault rifle at the same time. No matter what situation I'm in, I'm covered. And because the M4 is so good, even if you're at short range, you can probably still outgun shotguns and SMGs up close. So you're kind of covered in every single circumstance. Yes, you may get a couple more hit markers with the Kar 98 than you would with, let's say, the HDR, but I find that the aim down sight speed is so good on this weapon that it's worth that trade-off. Just make sure you're aiming for that upper body and you'll do incredibly well. Now this second class is a class that I like to use in any respawn 6v6 game mode, and it's a weapon that I'm actually shocked is good. This weapon, of course, that you're looking at is the Odin, and the magic of this weapon is its damage. You're pretty much always going to be looking at a 2 to 3 bullet kill, unless you're at extremely long range, and we're going to kind of add to that when we look at the class setup. But this is a weapon I hadn't really used since the beta, but upon using it, I realized it's an absolute beast. And if you haven't given it a shot simply because it has a low rate of fire, I really recommend giving this one a shot. And really, it's a super easy class to make because there's really only 2 attachments that are absolutely must-have. So looking at the class here, the 2 must-have attachments are the Colossus Suppressor, as it adds damage range and recoil control. The sound suppression is just a bonus. And then the second is, once again, the Stippled Grip Tape. This is just an amazing attachment on any weapon. We talked about why before. Now, your other attachments are pretty much just what you want to use. Sleight of Hand I do think is necessary because it does have a small magazine size, and like as you're going to see, I use Sleight of Hand a lot. I don't like the iron sight, so once again I'm using a red dot sight. And then finally I'm using the 25 round mags. You can use pretty much anything instead of this. It's just what I use. Like I said, there's only the 2 attachments that are really necessary. As far as a secondary weapon, I am using the XRK 357. The reason being, I don't normally use much of my secondary whatsoever. This one already has 5 attachments on it, and that way I just don't really need to worry about it. It could go much more in depth with this, but the whole point of this class is to use the Odin as much as possible. As far as perks, obviously I'm not using Overkill this time, so I use EOD instead. I use EOD on most of my classes. That way I don't really have to worry about claymores or grenades or Semtex too much. I just have to worry about getting hit by them twice, which isn't a very big deal. And then once again, using Ghost and then Battle Hardened. Like I said, if you don't like Battle Hardened, just switch it over to Tracker. So I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm sure a lot of you are going to disagree. Keep in mind, all of these classes are my opinion. If you disagree with them, just let me know down in the comments. I think this is the best weapon in the game. After using all of these weapons almost constantly, the time to kill on this weapon is beastly. You barely have to hit any bullets. There's so little recoil. It is good on every single map. If you haven't tried out this weapon, give it a shot. I think you'll be shocked by it. Even with no attachments, yes, the iron sights are a little difficult to use, but holy crap is this gun good. Give it a shot. I'm telling you, it's one of, if not the best weapon in the game. So the last class may have been the best, but I think that this next one is the most fun. Now, first of all, I have to start out by saying I do think that the MP5 is a little bit better than this weapon, and we're going to get into a class for that one a little bit later on, but this is the MP7. This gun is, I think, severely underrated because it doesn't have quite as fast time to kill as the MP5 up close. However, this gun essentially has no recoil, and when you use the attachments that I use, this gun is good at any single range and has such a fast fire rate that even at a long range, you're going to be able to outgun assault rifles pretty damn easily. So the class setup that I'm using for this one is, first of all, the compensator. So this is going to add recoil control. It seems like a bad trade-off, but this is for your long-range gunfights, and you're going to counteract it by, once again, using, you guessed it, the Stippled Grip Tape. like I said, pretty much use it on every single one of my classes. After this, you use the FSS Strike Barrel. This is going to improve your damage range and bullet velocity, once again for those long gunfights. After this, I use the 50 round mags. I actually do think that this is important. The less you have to reload, the better with this weapon, because with this class, you are running gunning as much as possible. And then after that, I'm using sleight of hand as well, so I don't get caught with my pants down, because once again, I'm not really using a secondary weapon. Yes, I have the Magnum there just in case, but I'm almost never using it with 50 round magazines and sleight of hand. After this, the perks are a little bit different on this one. The only big change is I am using Tracker on here. With an SMG or a shotgun, I almost always use Tracker instead of Battle Hardened. So that way it's easier to find people and makes it easier to rush, like I said before. Rest of the class, pretty much exactly the same what we've previously talked about. Like I said before, the magic of the MP7 comes in the lack of recoil with a really high fire rate. The higher a fire rate, the better the gun's going to actually be at long range. And because the recoil's low, it's actually usable at a long range. So if you haven't tried out the MP7, just do it, because this gun is absolutely phenomenal. Like I said, I still think the MP5 is a little bit better with the right attachments, but the MP7, in my opinion, is one, a lot more fun and better at long range, which makes it good in more situations. Now, class number 4, this is the wild card of the group. So this one, I'm of course using the Ram 7, which is one of the new weapons from the Battle Pass, and this weapon is actually really damn good. One of the best assault rifles in the game. Now, there are other weapons that probably could replace this, maybe the AK-47, but I prefer this one. It has a little bit faster of a fire rate, and I find it just does a little bit better because I don't think the recoil is that bad on it. I've seen some people complain about it, but let's be honest, they're crazy. So, the attachments that I'm using on this one are relatively straightforward. The magic of this weapon comes from the XRK Ranger barrel. It adds damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control, and once again, we are going to make up for those cons by using the stippled grip. Just use it on every weapon. It's unreal. Best attachment for sure. After this, 45 round mags and sleight of hand for the same reasons we talked about before. When rushing around, having more bullets and being able to reload faster are incredibly important. Now, the controversial part of this class is the optic. You don't really need an optic attachment on this weapon, but I don't like the iron sights, so if you don't use an optic, simply use the close quarter stock or the ultralight hollow stock instead. I prefer the close quarter stock, but like I said, I'm using the optic, so I don't really have that option. The rest of the class is exactly what we've seen before. Some sort of secondary weapon. Once again, I'm using that XRK 357. The same perks as before, the EOD, Ghost, and Battle Harden. Once again, switch out that Battle Harden for Tracker if you want, and then finally Semtex and Stim once again. So I think this weapon's often overlooked simply because it's a DLC weapon, but honestly, it's really good. Up those close quarters and mid-range gunfights, it's going to really excel, and honestly kind of similar to that MP7 since it does have a really high fire rate with very low recoil. You can definitely pick some people off at long range too. So if you haven't tried this gun out, try out those attachments that I told you about, and I think you'll find some pretty good success with this one. Now, my final class here is specifically made for search and destroy and non-respawn game modes like Cyber Attack. So I actually really enjoy search and destroy in this game, and class setups need to be actually quite a bit different within this game mode. However, they're somewhat similar to a couple things that we looked at before. First of all, once again, with this class, I am using overkill with a sniper rifle. I think using a sniper rifle in search and destroy or a non-respawn game is incredibly important to be able to get those early picks across the map. However, I'm using an SMG instead of the M4 that we used before. In this case, I am using the MP5. So the class setup that I'm using on this one is actually very similar to what I use in respawn game modes with one little change. So first of all, I'm using the compensator to improve the recoil, and once again, the stippled grip to improve the aim down sight speed and sprint out fire speed. The 10mm rounds, in my opinion, are an absolute must. It improves the damage and range and just makes the gun all around better, in my opinion. I'm using an optic, so I'm using the mini reflex, which I think is probably the best sight on the MP5. Just my opinion, least field of view taken up by the actual sight. And then the other one is the stock. So I'm using the FSS close quarters stock, which I think is really good for search and destroy. The reason why I'm using this is because I'm not using sleight of hand. So if you're playing a respawn game mode, use sleight of hand, but if you're playing search, you don't need sleight of hand, so just use the stock that's going to make your aim down sight speed faster and help you win more gunfights. So that's really the main difference. Once again, using that exact same Car 98 class that we saw before, so no change there whatsoever. The other big change is the perks. So the perks on this one, I use High Alert and Tracker. Now, if the enemy is stomping our team, I'll swap the perk over to Ghost because they're probably using UAVs, but by using High Alert, it allows me to see when someone's having a look at me, and Tracker helps me track down people in search and destroy, which is very important because the more kills you get, more likely you are to win the actual game. Now, the other things that I use are the Semtex and Stim. This didn't change whatsoever. I still think Stim is important in search and destroy, just to be able to heal up faster and keep moving forward. Now, the other big difference is the kill streaks and the field upgrades. So first of all, for field upgrades, just don't use the munitions box. You don't need it. So I just use Dead Silence and Dead Silence alone. So you just take off the field upgrade pro and just use Dead Silence. And then the second thing is kill streaks. So the kill streaks that I'm using here are UAV, cruise missile, and Wheelson. Let me quickly explain why. First of all, I see a lot of people use personal radars. Do not use personal radars. If you didn't know this, when you use a personal radar, the little helicopter actually follows you around on the map and just gives away your position in search and destroy. Do not use personal radar in search and destroy. It's just going to screw you over. So instead, I just use a regular UAV. It also helps out my team. I use cruise missile because I have the time to actually control it and I'm more likely to get a kill than I would with the cluster strike. And then finally, if you manage to get a Wheelson, you're pretty much going to win the round with the Wheelson alone. So that's why I use that one. So like I said, you can take this MP5 class and just use it in any game mode, but I really do think this is the best search and destroy class. First of all, you have that sniper rifle to pick people off across the map. It's going to be super reliable and easy to pick people off, get that early kill to give your team an advantage. On top of that, you're using an SMG, which is going to be good up close, but with those 10mm rounds, you can also use it like an assault rifle to take people down at mid-range. You essentially have a gun for every single range in the game, and it's going to help you excel in search and destroy. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are my top 5 classes within Modern Warfare. As I said before, if you disagree with them, you like something else, feel free to let me know what you use down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, it helped you out a little bit, I always do appreciate it if you do hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, like what you see here, and want to stay up to date on all my videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you have notifications turned on. And until next time, guys, peace out.
We are reaching for the